Canada's current trade deal with the U.S. and Mexico, CUSMA, is facing a crucial review in Washington. This is the first opportunity for the three nations to reshape the 2020 pact that right now is providing some protections in the current trade and tariff upheaval.
The moment that statement left Washington, something quietly snapped in North American trade. Not with a bang, not with a tariff announcement, but with a list. A list that was supposed to project authority and instead exposed anxiety. Because when power is confident, it doesn't explain itself. And when dominance is real, it doesn't need conditions. What was presented as a set of demands was actually a confession. Jamieson Greer stood before Congress and outlined what the United States claims must change for CUSMA to move forward. On paper, it looked technical, regulatory language, policy references, bureaucratic phrasing. But stripped of diplomatic insulation, that document read like something far more revealing. It read like a catalog of frustrations, every item a pressure point, every complaint an admission that something north of the border is working too well. This wasn't about correcting failures. It was about dismantling successes. Because think about what was actually named: dairy supply management, digital streaming regulations, provincial alcohol controls, procurement rules in Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia, customs processes, even Alberta's electricity distribution policies. These aren't marginal footnotes. These are core instruments of economic sovereignty, tools deliberately designed to protect domestic industries, stabilize markets, and limit foreign dominance. And now Washington wants them changed. Not because they're broken, but because American industries are losing against them. For decades, the assumption was simple. Access to the American market was the prize. And Canada, like many countries, was expected to bend to preserve it. That assumption is now collapsing in real time. And Greer's testimony didn't hide it, it confirmed it. Take dairy. The United States has complained for years that Canada's supply-managed system is unfair. But what never gets said out loud is that the system works. It protects farmers, it stabilizes prices, and it produces goods competitive enough to challenge American producers internationally. Canada already allows tariff-free U.S. dairy imports up to a quota. That quota is rarely filled. Not because access is blocked, but because American suppliers can't consistently compete. So Washington isn't asking Canada to open a closed door. It's asking Canada to tear down a structure that exposes American inefficiency. And then there's streaming. The argument is framed as discrimination against U.S. tech companies. But the reality is much simpler and much more uncomfortable. Canadian content laws force platforms like Netflix, Spotify, and YouTube to invest locally, to fund Canadian creators, to amplify Canadian stories, to contribute instead of extract. That policy is doing exactly what it was designed to do. And that's why it's under attack. Because every dollar redirected into Canadian media is a dollar not flowing unchecked back to Silicon Valley. It's proof that cultural sovereignty is enforceable even in the digital age. And Washington doesn't object because it's unfair. It objects because it works. The most telling reaction came not from federal offices, but from provincial shelves. After U.S. tariffs hit steel, aluminum, autos, and lumber, Canadian provinces responded without waiting for Ottawa. Alcohol disappeared. Jack Daniels vanished. Brown-Forman watched sales collapse by more than 60%. And suddenly, what Washington dismissed as symbolic retaliation became financially painful. That reaction exposed something the Trump administration didn't anticipate. Canada doesn't need centralized permission to apply pressure. Provincial coordination creates a distributed response system that can't be neutralized with a single phone call or concession. When Doug Ford made it clear that tariff relief was the price of shelf space, it wasn't a threat. It was a lesson in cause and effect. And the fact that Greer raised provincial liquor boards in a congressional hearing tells you how deep that lesson cut. Then there's procurement, The complaint is that provinces prioritize domestic suppliers. But what that really means is that Canadian tax dollars are staying in Canadian economies. Infrastructure spending isn't charity, it's investment. And demanding that provinces outsource it to foreign firms isn't free trade, it's enforced dependence. Customs requirements follow the same pattern. American exporters describe Canadian processes as complicated. But complexity isn't discrimination, it's regulation. And expecting a country to weaken its border procedures for convenience isn't negotiation, it's entitlement. What makes Greer's testimony remarkable isn't what he criticized, it's what he acknowledged. He admitted that CUSMA has been largely successful. He acknowledged that U.S. exports to Canada and Mexico are up more than 50% since 2020. He noted that nearly every business and labor group testifying called for the agreement to continue. He even recognized concessions Canada has already made. And then came the pivot. Despite all that, he argued that renewing the agreement as is would not be in America's national interest. That sentence is the entire story. Because what it actually means is this: the agreement works, but it works too well for Canada. Washington isn't trying to fix a failing framework. It's trying to rebalance one that no longer guarantees American dominance. And that's a very different negotiation. The timeline makes this impossible to ignore. Tariffs came first, confidence followed. Analysts predicted Canadian capitulation. Instead, provinces coordinated. Industries absorbed pressure. Public support held. When Ottawa removed certain taxes and tariffs, Washington read it as weakness. But it wasn't surrender, it was positioning. By the time review hearings began, American testimony had unintentionally mapped every Canadian policy, causing discomfort. Greer didn't present demands from a position of leverage. He compiled grievances from a position that's eroding. And here's what never appeared in his list: no guarantees, no reciprocal concessions, no acknowledgement that Canada might gain anything by complying, no tariff relief commitments, no access expansions, just requests for unilateral disarmament. That's not strategy, that's hope. The deeper shift is structural. Canada is no longer negotiating from fear of exclusion. Trade with Europe is deepening. Asia-Pacific partnerships are expanding. And politically, standing firm against American pressure is no longer punished at home. It's rewarded. Voters understand the cost of sovereignty, and they're willing to pay it. The assumption that Canada needs CUSMA more than the US does collapses the moment you acknowledge supply chain integration. Disruption cuts both ways. Interdependence means enforcement requires cooperation. And cooperation isn't coming without balance. Greer can list conditions. He can signal frustration. He can frame Canadian success as unfairness. But he cannot explain how to force compliance without offering something equally valuable in return.